Hi, I'm George Pearson, and these are just a few examples from some of the training videos I have here on YouTube. Now, when you're working with the training, following along the training, if you want to get the materials I used in the training, just go to the description down below and click on the link that's at the top of the description, and this will take you to a page where you can download the materials. Please subscribe, click the like button, and of course always share on Facebook, Twitter, or wherever. I really appreciate that. Okay, let's go ahead and get started with the video. This time around in Photoshop Elements, we're going to be creating a bokeh effect. This is kind of interesting out of focus blurred background effect with these hotspots for lights, and then use it to create a new background for this picture. Now the picture I'm starting off with is this one. Kind of a nice faded daytime shot. It's a pretty shot, but it can be a lot more dramatic, and I think by doing this to the picture it becomes much more dramatic. Let's see how this whole thing is done, how the whole process is done. I'm just going to get rid of this. We no longer need that file. I'll save that. There we go. Now I started off with this picture right here, and I use this as the basis for the bokeh effect. And that's that look right there. Now this is actually just completely faked. There's nothing about this. You can do that kind of a nice effect if you happen to have Photoshop, Adobe Photoshop program. They have a filter that will do a lot of this stuff for you. We don't have that available to us inside of Photoshop Elements, so we have to do this the hard way, and that's by doing several layers. Let me just show you how this whole thing works. I'm going to just back up here. I'll delete all those layers. Go right back to our basic layer. There we go. So it's just like I started. The first thing I always do is I take the background layer and I make a copy of that, drag it to the new layer button, make a copy of it, and hide the original. This way I can always go back to the original in case I happen to mess things up. Now the first thing you want to do is you want to fade this out or fuzz this out, soften up the whole look. We don't want to have this real crystal clear like this. So use Filter, Blur, and the Gaussian Blur filter. And I blurred out quite a ways. Way out here someplace like that. So it's pretty blurry. It just gives us just some nice variations on shapes in there. Choose OK. So there's our basic blur on that. Now I want this more contrasty in this. So I want to really bring the contrast up. So let's go up here to our Enhance, and let's come down to Adjust Lighting and grab Levels. I like to use levels for this. If you pull the left side in, it makes the darks darker. If you pull the right side in, it makes the lights lighter. So by pulling them both in like this towards each other, you can really bump the contrast up, and then use the middle to kind of adjust the overall values. And I think something right around in here is pretty good. As you see, I brought the darks in a little ways into the dark side. I brought the whites just into where the whites are beginning to come in, and then I kept the midtones just about middle, a little bit to the left of middle, but to give this kind of a basic look. Now we need to do our fake bokeh lights. Now to do this, I created 4 layers. I go 4 blank layers just like that, and then I chose a background and a foreground color from this color set. Now I did a foreground color from right in here. It's just kind of a light tan color, but anything in this range here, any of your lighter colors is fine, but make sure it has some color to it. And then for the dark color, I chose in the purples right down in here. Again, just make sure you have some values. Don't go for a white and black in here. Make sure you have colors in there. And again, I chose something from my light range of colors and then something from the dark range of colors. Okay, that takes care of the basic color selections. Now let's go to the paintbrush, and we're doing a couple of special things on our paintbrush. First, let's come in and just choose a hard edge brush. I'll choose the 19, which is a hard edge at 19 pixels. Now the 19 over here, this isn't the number of the brush. A lot of people think that that's what that is, but that's not. This is the size of the pixels of the brush, but it's a hard edge brush at 19 pixels. We'll then change the size of this. Just go over here, click where it says PX, and I'm going to change the size of this up to 250. So it's a pretty good size brush on this picture. See, there's the brush size right there on the picture. Okay, now that's not enough yet. We need to put in some special settings on our brush. Go to Brush Settings, and in here we're going to be adjusting some of these options. On Fade, I'll set this for 22. on the hue jitter, bring that clear to the top, and that's going to change between the foreground and background colors for us. On scatter, this is going to spread the dots. You can see the little icon down here. If you watch that, as I move scatter around, it kind of spreads the dots around, just spaces them out. The fade is allowing the overlap and kind of transparency happening in there. And I found for this 22 works out pretty nicely. On the scatter, though, I want a lot of scatter. So I put this at 100 on the scatter. And then spacing is how far apart these dots are. So I bring the spacing up. Notice how the dots get further apart as I bring this up. And I want my dots a long ways apart, so I'll change this to 399 and really space the dots out. Now it's going to be random based upon these settings. What you have is set in, so fade 22, hue jitter clear to the top, scatter clear to the top, and then spacing at 399. Close that down. Now if I just click in here, so what happens, it gives me kind of a scattered bunch of colors and kind of scattered dots. So there's my first layer. Let's go up to layer 2, and I'll do that again on layer 2, left and right. Layer 3, I'll hit the middle in here and over there. And then layer 4, I'll do a few more. So I'm just creating some dot patterns in here. I'm using different layers so we have overlaps happening and transparency happening on that overlap. Okay, so there's our basic dot patterns. I now want to blend all these into the background better than this. We'll be doing that by changing our settings. We'll match the settings on all of our layers. Our first setting is the blending mode. Let's set this to screen. Each one of these gets set to screen. And this helps to blend these into the background. It gives them more of a light effect. Okay, they're all blended into the background now. Now each layer is going to be set to an opacity of 90, and that's going to help the overlap effect. There we go. See, it's getting closer already. And then 90. And finally, I want to soften the edge up just a little bit on these. So go up here to Filter, Blur, and Gaussian Blur right there. I'm going to set the Gaussian Blur at 8 for this. And if I can find where that is, let me just back out here a bit and find some dots. Okay, here's some dots. And if I zoom in a little bit on this, see, there's before and after. So I'm just kind of fuzzing out the edge just a bit. Not a whole lot, just a bit. Choose OK. So we've done our first layer. Now for the rest of these, it's easy because that filter is at the very top. That you can just repeat that by clicking on that top link. So up here, Filter, Gaussian Blur, and then down here, Filter and Gaussian Blur. There we go. Okay, that takes care of our background light effect. We'll do a little more with this, one more step, once we get it over into our picture, once we see how things look. Now on the last little step on this, I want to combine all these layers into one layer to make it easy to copy over. A couple ways of doing that. One, you just save this as a bitmap file and then open the bitmap file in the other file. That's one way to do it. Or my personal technique, click on the top, hold down the Control, Shift, Alt, and then tap the E key, and that merges all of those layers up to a new layer right there. The whole thing is now merged. Let me just bring up that keyboard shortcut for you and see what I just did there. There we go. One of my favorite keyboard shortcuts, Control, Alt, Shift, E, or on a Macintosh, Command, Option, Shift, E. E can be upper or lowercase, doesn't matter. So there you go. That takes your existing layers, there it is, all of your visible layers, and it merges your visible layers onto a new layer. Okay, now I'm just going to float this. I'll pull this out here and float that like that. And then I'll grab that layer we just did and pull that whole thing over here to the new file. And then let's just save this, file save, and close that. We're done with that. Now the size is too big here, so you need to bring the size down. So pull it out so you can see your corner. Just grab a corner and pull that down a bit. And I think something around in here would be pretty good. And just choose OK. And then pull it underneath this layer. Now to do that, you want to first, of course, save your background layer. So I'm going to take the background, drag it up here to a new layer button. Gives me a new layer. Hide the background, as I always like to do. Take the bokeh layer. Let me just type that in here. There we go. And drag that down. That puts the girl in front and that layer in behind. We'll adjust this a little later on once we get back to that point. Okay, now it's time to work on the image of the girl. I'm going to zoom in a bit here, and let's just float this window. There we go. Let's pull that off to float that. Now if your window doesn't float for you, easy to fix. Edit, Preferences, General. Make sure that these two are checked. Allow floating documents in expert mode and enable floating document window docking. Make sure those are checked. Choose OK, and then you can drag it up to dock it, or you can pull it off to float it. Okay. One more zoom on this. A little bit too far. Let me back out again. All right, now I want to make a selection in here, and we'll do this time by using the quick selection tool right there. And it's not a very large size, as you can see, but it does a pretty good job of grabbing everything. And we'll just come in here, and there's my first selection. Make sure that you click on Add once you make your selection. We'll come back to Subtract in just a minute. And let's see how much of the girl we can get in here easily this way. And there we go. And this last little bit right down there. Okay, so that's all selected. Now I want to get rid of this stuff in here, and I want to get rid of this stuff in behind there. So let me just squeeze my window down a little bit here. Switch over to Subtract, and let's come in here and see if we can select that out. That's pretty good. I'll touch up those little areas in just a second. And let's take care of the background here. Just come down a little bit on the background and select that out. Okay, so we're close. It's still not perfect. So I'm going to take this a little bit further. We're going to be using the Select and Refine Edge tool in here. Click on that. That brings up this tool. You see, here's our size. I'm working with 138 on my brush size, which is okay for this. Now on this, see that plus sign is with the circle around it? You want the circle to be going over what you want to keep, and the plus sign being in the area that you want Photoshop Elements to re-examine and try to find the edge. So just kind of paint along that and then let go, and it checks that for you. So I'll just do that right in here. Cleans that edge up. It's a little bit off right there. We'll fix that. We'll come back to that. But let's just do this up in the hair mostly. Just kind of paint down the side like that and let go, and let Photoshop Elements find those edges for you. Okay, now that we have that in, let's output this to a new layer with Layer Mask and choose OK. There we go. There's our new layer. There's our Layer Mask, and you can see there's the background in behind. Now there are a few things we need to fix. On the layer up here, if you paint into the mask, if you paint white, it's going to show. If you paint black, it's going to hide. So I can clean up some of this. We'll get this as a last step right there. Look on my dark edge. We'll get that as a last step. I want to come in here though and fix this a little bit. I want to make this a little bit darker. So I'm going to just zoom that up a bit. Let's make sure we're on the layer mask. We are. Go to my default colors. Make sure that black is in front. Grab the paintbrush and let's bring the size. I actually need to choose a different brush. So let's go back here. I'm going to go to 21 soft edge, 27 pixels. That's pretty good. And then bring the size up. I think that's okay. So maybe painting, actually this time, I want to show more here. So let's switch this to white. So white shows and black hides. I'm just going to come in here and just make sure that that's all showing really well. Okay, so far so good. We now have our basic girl in here. We have our background looking good. We're now going to work on the quality of the image in here. At this point, you may want to make a copy of this layer just as a backup. So I'll grab it up here, new layer button. Let's hide that layer. That gives me a copy just in case I mess up, because we're going to be working right on this image. So I was like a backup copy at that point. Let's now come in and do some adjustments on this picture. Make sure you're on the image side and not on the layer mask. So double click, look for that light blue outline. That lets you know you're on the image. We're going to do some adjustments in here. I want to bring the contrast up a bit, darken the image down a little bit, give it more of a bluish tone, a few things like that. So that's all using the enhance up here. We'll start off with adjust lighting, and let's go to our levels. And as we did in the city, if I bring the blacks up, it darkens the blacks down. That gives us more contrast, makes it look a bit more interesting. You can adjust the highlights here, bring them in just a little bit. It makes the highlights a little stronger, a little more contrasty. And if you want to, you can adjust the midtones in here. A little darker is better than lighter, but not much. Notice normal is 100 or 1.0. Bring it down to 0.95, just a little bit down. You see the edge right there. We'll fix that as a last step, so don't worry about that. Okay, it's looking better. We have our contrast looking a little bit better in here. Let's now add in some bluish tones into this. These are the kind of things I would normally be doing with adjustment layers. Give me a little more control, but right now I'm just doing it right on the image. But I could have done this as an adjustment layer if I wanted to. But we now want to do a hue saturation. I'll do this on its own layer just in case. Hue saturation. Make sure you check this use previous layer to create clipping mask. That's just going to lock it to just this one layer and it won't touch anything else. So let's bring the lightness down a little bit like that. Bring the saturation up a little bit. Just a bit. We're just kind of tweaking this and giving it a little bit more of an evening shot. You'll find if there's a lot of light, you'll have richer colors and a little bit darker colors. Just a little adjustment in there. Now I want to put in a bluish tone on this whole thing. So back up here to layer and adjustment layer. Come down to photo filter. Make sure that you click this here. Use previous layer to create clipping mask. This just locks this into that one layer. Choose OK. Here's our photo filter, and the one I want here is 82, which is a cooling filter, and puts blue into the image, just like that. And I can bring the density down a little bit if it's too blue. You can control that, but I think a lot of blue actually helps on this one. You can preserve luminosity if you want to. I don't want to preserve luminosity. I want it to come down a little bit, so I'll leave that unchecked. Okay, that takes care of the blueness on this. One last little adjustment on our levels. So layer, adjustment layer, brightness, contrast this time. Again, clip this to that mask. There we go. So it just links on. Notice that these are all indented. It means that they're going to be applied just to that one layer. And let's bring our contrast up a little bit and brightness a little bit there. Just giving a bit more of an evening light-ish kind of a look. Okay, so we're pretty close on this. It's not perfect yet, but we're pretty close on the whole thing. We now can do a bit more to make this a little bit more interesting. The first thing I want to do is to soften up the edges in here of this image. And I'm going to be doing that by making a copy of my layer down here. This is why I actually did that one effect on the layer itself, our first levels effect. Take this, copy this up here, make a new layer, drag it in behind, and on this layer I want to come in and fuzz this out just a little bit. So let's go up here to filter. Actually, there's a couple more things I need to do. I want to fuzz it out, but I want to fuzz out beyond the layer mask. So I want to clip out the image, and I'll use the layer mask to do that. Click on your layer mask, right click, add mask to selection. What that does is it gives you a selection based on the layer mask. Go back over to the picture side. So we now have the girl selected. What I want though is the background selected. So I can delete that. So go up to select and inverse. There we go. Now the background is selected on this layer. Notice you can see the trees and stuff in there still. Hit the delete key and you should then be seeing transparency in there, just like that. Okay, we can now deselect and back to this layer, right click and delete that layer mask. I no longer want the layer mask in there. We now can fuzz this layer out just a little bit, and that's going to then give us a little bit of softening around the edge. So I'm putting a copy of the picture of the same girl in behind her, fuzzing that out a little bit to give us a softened edge. So filter, blur, Gaussian blur, and you can see here as I pull this up, you can kind of see the effect on the edge here. I'm going to be setting this at 16, and as I click the on and off, you see it just kind of softens up that edge, and there's a little bit of a soft edge on that. Gives it a little bit more of a fantasy effect. It's a subtle effect, but I kind of like that. Choose OK. So there's our softening effect. Now I want to pull some of the brighter light effect in here onto our image. So go up here to the very top, make a new layer so it's above everything else. And on this layer we're going to be painting in some lights. We use our bright color right there. We'll just paint it in along the edge here and along that edge there. I want it to be contained inside of just the girl and not out of the background, so I need my layer mask again. Click on the layer mask, hold the Alt key down and drag that up to that layer. So I now have a blank layer with a working layer mask that matches that layer mask. Okay, click on the blank part. Make sure that you see that blue outline. Let's go to the brush color here. That's fine. I think I'll leave that. That's okay. Grab the paintbrush, and I want a nice soft brush. There we go. I just docked that picture in case you're curious about what just happened there. And now I'm just going to paint right along the edge. Just like that. And then a little bit right in along the edge here. Little touch in there. So not very much, just a little thin edge. Now it looks kind of harsh at this point, and it is. So I want to tone that down a touch. And we can do that by changing our blending mode over here to overlay. And that just blends that in. So there we go. Nice little blended in. Notice how that dark line has now just about gotten, been removed. So that's kind of solved. Okay, looking good. We're not all the way done yet though. And at this point you can come back in and tweak if you want to. There's a couple little tweaks I want to do here. Right here there's a little bit of discoloration down here on her shoulder. Let's just fix that on that layer. So I'll zoom in and let's go over to our healing brush tool right there, healing brush. And get a size about the same, just a little bit larger than those spots. All you have to do, make sure you're on the image, look for that blue outline, and then just click on the spot, and Photoshop will get rid of that for you. Went too far on that one, let me just undo that. I was too close to that edge for that to work. So far so good. It's a little bit darker right in here. I'm just going to fix that. I'll use the clone stamp tool. Put it at about 70, I think, on this picture, 70 pixels. And I'll grab something from right there, just Alt click, and then come right over here and just tap that in. There we go, gets rid of that redness. That's a little subtle touch-ups, but we might as well go ahead and make the picture as nice as possible. Okay, let's fit on screen and look at the background. Now we can adjust the background image over here. So I click on the background image, come over into the image itself, and you can then move that around until you find a nice set of lights that you think looks pretty good. I think that's too bright, so I'm going to come in just a bit. I like this over here. Okay, that's looking nice. Now if you want to bring in more contrast on it to make that background darker, it's easy to do. Just grab that background, drag it up here to the new layer so you have two of those, and then we're going to blend this layer into the layer underneath. So we're going to actually blend these two layers together. So go up to our blend modes up here, And so you have lots of options. I'm just going to roll it down so you can see what happens in here. If I use the wheel mouse, or the wheel on my mouse, and I roll through these, you get these different options on these. There's screen, color dodge, linear dodge, lots of different options. I'm going to go for overlay, which really accentuates the look of the background. It really makes it look much more like it's an actual out of focus bokeh effect in there. So there we go. That takes care of our image. We've taken a girl out of her existing background, existing look, and we have changed the background to our faked bokeh-like background, and then improved the colors, kind of blend them in with that background. So there you go. That's how you can change the background on a portrait and put in a new background, and also how you can make a faked bokeh effect. Thank you for watching this special Photoshop photography project video. Don't forget to subscribe so that you will get first notice of new project videos in the future. Just click on this link right here where it says subscribe here. You can get all 12 project videos in this series, along with 26 special videos demonstrating the tools and techniques that I used in these projects, by clicking on this link right down here. And then thank you again for watching this